My name is Drayden Cole, and I am a brigadier general in U.S. military intelligence. I've served across 5 continents, written threat maps that saved lives, and buried more secrets than medals. You wouldn't find my name in press releases. That was the point. I operated in the shadows until the day my own family pretended I didn't exist. It was my father's retirement ceremony, full military honors, national anthem, media coverage, the works. The kind of event where your last name mattered more than your rank, unless you were me. I arrived in full dress uniform, pressed, silent. Not for attention, but because regulation demanded it. The corporal at the gate scanned the list. My name wasn't there. I've got Joanne Von Mason Von, but no Drayden Cole, he said. I handed him my ID. He looked at it like it might be fake. My father is Lieutenant General Thomas Vaughn. He checked again, still not seeing it. Then my family walked past. My mother's pearls caught the sunlight. My brother's fiancée wore her victory grin. Mason didn't stop, just tossed over his shoulder. Clearance issue. The corporal shifted awkwardly. I can call, don't bother, I said. I waited. Not as a daughter, not even as a guest. I waited because this time I wasn't here for them. I was here to remind them exactly who they'd chosen to forget. I walked past the raw outline with steady regulation steps. The corporal saluted as I passed, still too stunned to recover. General Briggs didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. His presence had already rewritten the chain of command, at least for the next 5 minutes. Inside, the air changed. Where it had once been warm with nostalgia and pretense, it now held tension, the kind that follows when a ghost walks through a wall no one thought could be breached. The foyer was filled with photos of my father, black and white deployments from the 90s, color shots of NATO exercises, framed commendations glowing under the track lights. There wasn't a single image that included me. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even disappointed. I had stopped hoping for recognition from that wall a long time ago. The auditorium doors were open, and through them I saw rows of chairs filled with crisp uniforms and polished shoes. My family sat in the front row, flanked by other officers' wives and high-ranking guests. Mason was whispering something to our mother. She nodded without looking up, adjusting her collar like it was armor. My father stood near the podium, smiling as if he owned the hour. No one noticed me at first. That was fine. I moved to the reserved VIP seating across the aisle from my family, not because I wanted to be seen, but because that's where my name belonged, even if it wasn't printed on any card. I sat tall hands, folded eyes forward. Around me, other officers glanced in my direction, then away, like their minds couldn't reconcile what they saw. A woman in full command uniform, sitting alone, unannounced, unrecognized, yet clearly not someone to question. The announcer took the stage, prompting attendees to silence their phones. A few last-minute guests filed in, whispering apologies as they found seats. The lights dimmed. A Navy vocalist sang the national anthem so flawlessly that even the room's air seemed to stand still. I saw Mason scan the crowd once. His gaze brushed past me, paused, then moved on. His jaw tensed slightly. Good. Next came the opening speech, a standard preamble about legacy service and sacrifice. They mentioned my father's years in command, his innovations in training his overseas deployments. They used phrases like inspired generations and an embodiment of military excellence. The words flowed smoothly, like a resume being read aloud. But as the speaker turned the page, the cadence shifted. Before we proceed with honoring Lieutenant General Vaughn, the woman said, we have one additional recognition to make. Today we not only celebrate a legacy, but acknowledge the branch of that legacy too long overlooked. Whispers, shifting, eyes moving. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for Brigadier General Drayden Cole, awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for her work in Operation Silent Web. Silence cracked, then movement. Uniforms rustled as the audience stood. Heads turned. My mother turned. My father froze. I stood. And I walked forward, not as a daughter, not as a guest, but as a name they could no longer leave off the list. The walk to the stage felt longer than it was. Not because of nerves I had briefed black site recoveries and stood next to presidents without blinking, but because every step echoed down a hallway of years no one in that room had ever asked about. I didn't scan the crowd. I didn't look for my father's expression or check if Mason's jaw was still clenched. I knew what I'd find: confusion, discomfort, pride, in conflict with disbelief. Let them feel it. I had felt it for years. The woman waiting at the podium, Colonel Adrian Shaw, a rare ally, met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. In this world, that counted more than applause. She handed me the velvet box, without fanfare. Inside was the Distinguished Service Cross, second only to the Medal of Honor. A medal given for acts no one ever wanted to talk about. It sat heavy in my palm the way memory does. The announcer read from a crisp sheet: for exceptionally meritorious service in defense intelligence, including her leadership role in Operation Silent Web, the Department of Defense recognizes Brigadier General Drayden Cole. The rest blurred phrases about cross-agency cooperation, lives saved, threats dismantled. It wasn't the words that mattered. It was that they were being spoken aloud, in front of my family, in a room that had erased me on purpose. I stepped to the microphone, adjusted nothing, and waited. The room quieted, uncertain if I would speak. I did. For most of my career, I began my work was invisible. That's by design. You don't want the people handling threats to be the ones giving speeches. You want them quiet, focused, and effective. That's what I did. That's what my team did. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My job wasn't about medals or ceremonies. It was about preventing funerals. My job was to notice a pattern before it turned into a blast radius, to change a route before a convoy disappeared, to make the kind of calls that never show up on paper, but save lives just the same. A few officers in the third row nodded slowly. They understood. The rest were still trying to fit me into their picture of how a real soldier should look. I've been told I don't belong in these rooms, that my contributions are hard to measure, easy to dismiss. But if invisibility is the price of doing the job right, I paid it. I paused, scanning the front row. My father's eyes were locked on the stage, his hands still. Mason wasn't smiling anymore. My mother looked like she was holding her breath. I leaned in, not to the mic, but into the weight of the moment. But today, I said, I'm not invisible. Today you see me. Then I stepped back. No flourish, no bow. Just the truth dropped like a stone in still water. And for once they couldn't look away. I didn't return to my seat right away. I stood just off to the side of the stage as the announcer prepared to resume the ceremony. But before she could speak, a staff sergeant at the audiovisual table lifted a hand. The projector lit up again. No one had planned for this. Not my family, not the crowd, and certainly not me. The screen showed grainy footage clearly recorded in a secure location. A tan uniform came into view, dust still visible on the shoulders. The man had a scar above his left brow, a clipped haircut, and eyes that carried too many years. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but it cracked at the edges. My name is Captain Nathan Reyes, forward deployed 6th Infantry Division. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today. I'm still where she sent me. The audience rustled. I saw heads tilt, brows furrow. I was asked to say a few words about Brigadier General Cole. But I'm not here to give a speech. I'm here because I owe her my life. Now people were sitting up straighter. In the front row, my father's posture finally broke. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. 6 years ago, Reyes continued my unit, was assigned to what looked like a routine recon post. On paper, it was clean, but someone I didn't know who at the time flagged inconsistencies in the satellite data. She delayed our convoy by 27 minutes. That delay saved all our lives. He took a breath. When Operation Silent Web was declassified, I started connecting the dots. That voice on the secure line, the one who changed our orders at the last second, that was General Cole. I'd never seen her face until today, but I've carried her name in my chest ever since. The room was silent now, every shoulder squared, every breath held. I met my daughter because of her, he added. I held my wife again because of her. And while this ceremony is about honoring General Vaughn's service, I want to say this to him directly. Sir, you raised a leader who didn't just wear the uniform, she used it to rewrite outcomes. The screen went black. I didn't move. Couldn't. I could feel every heartbeat in the room, like the air itself was listening. Then slowly I turned. My father wasn't clapping. He wasn't smiling. But he was staring at me, really staring, like someone finally seeing the outline of a map they'd ignored for years. It was just a moment, but it held the weight of everything we'd never said. I stepped down from the stage and walked past the front row. My father didn't reach for me. My mother didn't speak. Mason looked down at his hands like they were foreign objects, and I kept walking each step steady, each breath deep. I had never felt more seen, and not a single word from them was required. The reception that followed was a blur of polished silverware, quiet murmurs, and uncomfortable glances. Uniforms brushed past me, like I was part of the decor, acknowledged, but not approached. That suited me fine. I didn't want small talk or polite backpats from strangers who only noticed once a projector told them to. I skipped the line at the buffet and poured myself a coffee, instead, black, no sugar, just the way I'd learned to take it during overnight intel briefings when caffeine was currency. I sipped slowly, standing near the far window, watching as officers clustered around my father. They congratulated him, toasted him, reaffirmed the legend. He smiled like he always had, gracious, composed, just enough warmth to be admired, never enough to be questioned. Then, for a moment, he turned, just slightly. Our eyes met again, but this time it didn't pass like wind through an open room. It stayed. I didn't flinch. Neither did he. And then he looked away. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sad. I felt confirmation. This wasn't a man who didn't know who I was. This was a man who didn't want to know because knowing might force him to change the version of me that fit inside his legacy. When I finished my coffee, I slipped out the side exit away from the photos, the flags, the polite applause. The air outside was colder now, sharper. It felt better on my skin than anything in that room. I made it halfway across the lot before I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, hesitant. Drayden, my father called. Not kid, not colonel, not even hey. Just my name, like he'd just learned how to say it properly. I turned. He wasn't rushing. He stopped a few paces away, hands in his coat pockets, his uniform now hidden beneath civilian fabric. I didn't know, he said. I let that statement float in the air between us. It was true and not true. You didn't want to, I replied. My voice was even, not angry, just factual. He nodded slowly. I thought you chose the distance, that you wanted it. I chose silence, I said. Because every time I spoke, you made me smaller. His shoulders sank ever so slightly. It wasn't defeat. It was realization, like the load he carried wasn't heavier, just older than he wanted to admit. You saved that man's life, he said after a moment. And others, I answered. You just never asked. He looked at me then. Not the way a father looks at a daughter, but the way a soldier looks at someone whose rank he finally respects. I was wrong about you. I didn't rush to forgive him. He didn't ask me to. I nodded once. That's not something I need you to fix in one sentence, I said. But it's a start. I didn't stay long after that. There was no catharsis, no dramatic hug, no final speech wrapped in emotion. My father and I simply stood there for a moment longer. Two officers in the cold, each carrying legacies we didn't fully understand. Then he nodded again and turned back toward the building. He didn't look over his shoulder. That was his version of trust, or maybe surrender. I climbed into my rental car and closed the door. The silence inside was a familiar kind. Not hollow, not lonely, just clean. I rested my hand on the steering wheel, let myself breathe. Then came another knock at the window. Mason. He looked unsure, a little flushed, like he hadn't decided whether this was an apology or a defense. I unlocked the door without a word. He slid into the passenger seat, still in uniform. His tie had loosened, and the metal on his chest sat slightly off-center. For once, he didn't fix it. I didn't know, he said. I stared ahead. That's been going around today. He exhaled slowly. I used to think you stayed away because you didn't care about any of it. About us. About Dad. About the family. I didn't answer right away. Then you never asked why I left. No, he admitted. I didn't. He rubbed his palms together, like the truth made him cold. Was it all real, he asked. The operation, the medals, the video. I turned toward him. Do you remember the Jordan training op 6 years ago, night jump, that got postponed last minute? He blinked. Yeah. Weather delay, they said. Not weather, I said. Missile chatter. I rerouted your entire division. His mouth parted slightly. Jesus. You're alive because someone behind a terminal was watching patterns no one else could see. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, quieter, almost like a question to himself, why didn't you ever say anything? I looked him in the eye. Because no one acted like they wanted to know. And this time he didn't argue. 6 months passed like water through cupped hands faster than I expected, but somehow still enough. I had transferred back stateside, settled into a quiet post near Quantico, where the work stayed sharp, but the stakes felt less like landmines. The apartment was small, uncluttered, with no family photos on the walls. Just sunlight, silence, and space. I liked it that way. Then, one Saturday morning, my phone rang. Blocked number. For a moment, I debated letting it go, but something told me not to. Drayden, my mother's voice, hesitant, almost soft. I paused. Yes, we got your address from Mason. I hope that's okay. It is. Another pause. She cleared her throat. Your father. Well, we were wondering if you'd like to come down next weekend. Just dinner, just us. I didn't say anything. I stared out the window, watching the sun break across the rooftops. You don't have to, she added quickly. It's just… He's been different. Quieter. Thinking more, I guess. Thinking about what? There was a long silence. Then you. The next Friday, a small box arrived at my office. No note, no return address, just a brass compass in a velvet case, military-issued edges, worn smooth with use. On the inside lid, an inscription, to General Drayden Cole, for what you carried that no one saw. I didn't need a signature. I knew exactly whose it was. That weekend, I drove back to the town I once left without goodbye. The house hadn't changed. Same flagpole, same trimmed hedges, but the porch light was already on, and the front door opened before I knocked. My father stood there, not in uniform, not in command, just a man in a cardigan who looked like he'd spent 6 months practicing how not to say the wrong thing. Hey, kid, he said. I stared at him, searching for the edge in his tone. There wasn't one. Hey, I said. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. He stepped aside and I walked in. For the first time, it didn't feel like trespassing. It felt like arrival. Conclusion. Dinner was quiet in a way that didn't ache. No one talked about ranks or postings. My mother passed the mashed potatoes like it was any other Sunday, and Mason cracked a dry joke about his inability to make rice without setting off a smoke detector. We laughed, really laughed. It startled me how natural it felt. After dessert, my father disappeared for a moment and returned holding a thick photo album. Not the glossy kind from promotion ceremonies, but one with fogged plastic sleeves and bent corners. He slid it across the table to me. Figured maybe there's room to update this, he said. I opened it carefully. Photos from when I was 7. In one, I stood next to him on base, wearing an oversized helmet, saluting too seriously. Another showed me boarding the bus to basic training, eyes forward, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. I hadn't known anyone took that one. As I turned the pages, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but gravity. Like the story had started to rebalance itself. Later, as I stood by the front door, my father handed me a sealed envelope. I opened it once I got to the car. Inside was a single sentence typed on plain paper. I see you now. No signature. Just that. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. On the drive back, the road felt different. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not to check if they were watching. Not to relive anything. For once, I didn't need to prove I'd been there. I'd been seen. And maybe that's the quiet victory. No one claps for the kind that doesn't end with a salute or a headline, but with someone finally learning how to say your name without hesitation. Drayden Cole, General, daughter, whole.